And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson. And Andrew, we are now into round 2 of this year's NBA playoffs. The final matchups of round 1 just finished up yesterday with the only Game 7 we had in the first round of this NBA playoffs. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. But some Game 2 action has been taking place as well. We'll also see some Game 2 action as well here tonight as of this recording on Monday, May 6th. But a very interesting round 1 in the NBA playoffs, to say the least. Maybe some results that we expected to happen. Maybe an upset or two that not a lot of people expected to happen overall in this NBA first round. But as we did mention in the last show, we were reeling off of that brutal Game 5 loss to the 76ers as a Knicks fan. And I said, depending on what our mood is for this show of this upcoming week, we'll have to see how we feel going into this episode here today, Johnson. But thankfully for our Knicks, they were able to get the job done. We'll recap that, in just a little bit. But we are in good spirits here today, recapping not only the first round of the NBA playoffs, but now previewing round 2.
Yeah, looking forward to the conference semifinals. Round 1 was packed with a lot of action. I would say some of the most memorable moments of the last decade happened this playoff, at least in round 1.
There were a lot of good memories.
Yeah, when you compare round 1 over the last 10 years, let's say from 2014 to 2024, not a lot of memorable moments. I mean, you kind of have a lot of blowouts, no really crazy upsets, but you had especially not even as a Knicks fan, but that Knicks-Sixers series might have been the best first round playoff series in 25 years. It was a barn burner from start to finish. And even if you just looked at the box score and said, wow, this is a close game, all these games are close. So it's not like at any point was any team completely out of it. Because I've said this before. A 10-point lead in the NBA is equivalent to a 2-point lead or a 4-point lead 20 years ago. Just the pace of play and the scoring difference has changed so much over the last decade that even a 15, 20-point lead, which used to be insurmountable in the 90s and 2000s, it's a cakewalk now to make up from that. You hit 4 threes and all of a sudden, okay, it's not a 19-point lead anymore. It's 7 points.
Right.
It's gotten crazy at this point. But I had a really good first series. I enjoyed the entirety of round 1. Like you said, round 2 already started for that Nuggets Timberwolves series, and I will say that my pick is not going to be impacted by that. I'm going to have my original pick that I had before, and I'm looking forward to start breaking this down.
Yeah, so I think for us as Knicks fans, we'll go into the Eastern Conference at the end of our Western Conference preview, recap, I should say. And let's start off in the West and see what happened down in the Western Conference. And start off with that 1-8 matchup between the Oklahoma City Thunder taking on the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, as you and I both know, and a lot of people know, Zion Williamson was not in this series for the Pelicans. Going into this one, got injured in the original playing game for the Pelicans when they lost to the Lakers. Then they would not have him for the second playing game against the Kings. They were able to get the job done and move on as the 8th seed in the Western Conference. But at the end of the day, they just really were no match for this Oklahoma City Thunder team, who now becomes the youngest team in NBA history to win a playoff series and now move on to the second round of the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, one of the youngest rosters in the NBA by far. I think the second youngest roster is the Orlando Magic, which we will cover.
I believe so, yeah.
Cover next. But yeah, this was not a memorable series, and the lack of Zion certainly hurt viewership and it hurt the on-court product as well. And you can make an argument that this would have been a 6, maybe 7 game series without Zion. Especially game 1. Game 1 was so close coming down to the final shot. A couple blowouts in between, and then a very competitive game 3 that they lost this past Monday. But really competitive. They had the lead going into the fourth quarter, so you could have made the argument that this would have been at least 6 or 7 games with Zion. And his presence off the court severely affected the product. And I think New Orleans is in a great situation. They're looking to extend. I think they're looking to extend Brandon Ingram for another 5 years, but that hasn't been proven yet.
Yeah, we'll have to see what comes to that. I think they're a weird team to gauge of what they are, because you have Zion as your franchise cornerstone, and you have Brandon Ingram, who's a nice number 2 on that roster.
CJ McCollum, but CJ's kind of aging out at this point.
Yeah, McCollum had a very weird playoff. I think he was very up and down. He wasn't very consistent enough for the Pelicans in this series, and they needed him to be consistent enough to win some of these games. Because as you mentioned, the Thunder only won one game by double, or excuse me, they won two games by double digits in this series. The other two games, those could be swings or misses right there, and that could easily make this a game six, game seven series for this matchup. But just didn't happen to go for the Pelicans' way, and the Thunder now. I think the interesting thing for the Thunder is because their series ended last Monday on the 29th. So they've had a little bit of rest since
I mean,
their last game.
Nick, to be honest with you, I think the only two guys that kind of showed up were Jonas Valanciunas and Herb Jones.
Right.
Those are the only two guys, and Herb Jones had uh, a drop off in offense, but his defense was still phenomenal. And when you say, like I said, having Zion out of there lets you the game plan changes. The defensive game plan changes from the opposing team. They can now double team Brandon Ingram, who had probably the worst stretch of games in his young career, and we're hoping he bounces back.
Yeah.
The no Zion factor was a huge factor this game.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see where they go because, there's been rumors every single year about Zion maybe wanting to leave. And whether that be true or not, who
I
knows?
doubt it at this point
I really
because
doubt it too.
he's kind of like set into that roster now, and
Right.
they realize they have a competitive team, and it's young outside of CJ McCollum and Jonas Valanciunas, Bi, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion, Jose Alvarado. Even though Jose Alvarado really didn't get a lot burned these playoffs, still young rotational guys that can stick around for the next 4 or 5 years. They're on good contracts.
Right.
So to me, I think they need to add maybe trade CJ McCollum and add a better point guard in the offseason if they can. I know point guards are kind of a dime a dozen in the NBA. Because CJ is really not a true point guard. I've always viewed him more as a two. So they can get someone that could facilitate the ball. I'm not saying CP3, but a CP3 like player just to
Right.
kind of put up maybe 13 to 15 points a game. But the guy that can get 7, 8 assists a night, that's what this team drastically needs. They desperately need a facilitator like that.
And there's another team in this Western Conference playoffs, which I know you and I will get into in a little bit, that also could use a point guard for sure. And it really showed in their first round matchup with Minnesota. But that might be already spoiling what I'm going into the team that I'm alluding to. But before we get into that series, let's move on to the Nuggets and the Lakers, that being the 2-7 matchup in the Western Conference. And you have to say, Johnson, this was another series that really could have gone either way. You
A
look at the
lot closer
results.
on paper.
Right. The results at every single game were pretty close. And if the Lakers didn't realistically, if you look at how the series went, game two, they lose on the buzzer beater from Jamal Murray in a game where they were up 20 points in the second half. They easily should have won that game and they just let it all collapse. And even in the game that they lost and got eliminated in, the same result happened. Murray hits the game winner with 3 seconds left. Lakers have no timeouts. They have to throw up a prayer. They don't get it to go. And the Nuggets hold on by 2 points in that game. But a very close competitive series between these two teams. It seems that the Lakers just weren't consistent enough to get this job done against the Nuggets as Denver took advantage and beat the Lakers for 5 games. They now advance to the second round in the NBA playoffs. And now the Lakers go into an offseason now having to figure out what to do with not only their roster, but now have to look for a new head coach after firing Darvin Ham just recently.
Yeah, LeBron James is a free agent. You want to keep that in mind as well. But I want to talk about the lead of the game here. If you actually broke down the time the Lakers had the lead versus the time the Nuggets had the lead versus the time it was tied. Lakers had the lead probably 3 to 4 times more than the Nuggets.
Yeah.
I saw, and this wasn't the complete. It was in the middle of Game 5 that the Lakers had led for like 129 minutes of the series. The Nuggets had led for the 40 minutes, and it was tied for about 18. That is a huge red flag. So there is someone out there, right, that potentially could have seen every single one of these games. They turned it off with, like, I don't know, maybe they're going to bed, maybe they fell asleep, they got to leave for work, whatever the story is. Okay, the Lakers have just led for, 55 minutes this game, and then all of a sudden, at the end of every game, Denver would just turn on the Jets, and they would win.
Right.
So there's someone out there that's like, wow, how did they blow this lead? Or how did they blow this lead? There's someone out there that was watching NBA basketball on the West Coast. Maybe they went to sleep or went to work or whatever it was. They turned the game off because they thought it was one. And if you pretty much just remove the scoreboard from the bottom right, it would look like the Lakers were dominating the entire time too.
And that game two game was one that signifies that entire thing. Because if you remember correctly, that was the same night where the Knicks had that thrilling game two win against the 76ers. So
Yes.
that was the game right after. And I watched that game through and through because, I was on an adrenaline rush after the Knicks won that game too. And I'm watching this game. I'm saying the Lakers are controlling the game, the pace of action. Murray's having a rough game, and it just seems as if the Nuggets don't get a good game out of Jamal Murray, they're not going to win many games in this postseason. And it's shown a lot of times in the last couple of years with Denver. And then you saw the Lakers at a 20-point lead in the second half. Anthony Davis got into some foul trouble. I think that's kind of where the momentum started turning towards Denver's way. The defense kind of picked up intensified wise. Davis gets 4 fouls, has to be taken out of the third quarter when he's having a monster game up until that point. And the Nuggets took advantage of that. They cut it to single digits going into the fourth quarter. They would eventually, as I mentioned, win it on that buzzer beater from Murray, who really picked it up in the second half of that game. But this is a weird team for the Lakers now because now you go into the offseason, they mentioned, you now have to look at a new head coach. And there's already a lot of responsibilities coaching the Lakers as it is because of how historic the franchise is. But who knows what the status of LeBron James is even going into this offseason. There's been rumors that this might have been his last year with the Lakers, and with his son Bronny James maybe going to the NBA draft this season as well, depending on what team he goes to. LeBron most likely will try to follow him in his footsteps and try to play with his son in his first NBA season.
He's saying it's not a priority though anymore.
He might be saying that, but I feel like that's something he would want to do.
So you telling me if the Knicks take Bronny in the second round, he comes at the Knicks?
You never know. I mean, listen, I think if it's the right system where it's not only a team that is championship ready, but then you add LeBron. That's all you need to sell LeBron.
Here's the thing:
on.
it's an oxymoron, though, and I'm not saying you particularly are a moron for saying this. But the oxymoron is, it's a championship ready team. You get add LeBron. Great. What does LeBron want to do? He wants to play with his son. So I don't think he could play the game with his son and aspire to win a championship at the same time. I think he has to pick one.
Well, I feel like
no NBA rotation
right.
is going to just let him get into the rotation on a regular basis. Boston's not going to do that. OKC is not going to do that. Minnesota, Denver, whoever it is, they're not going to allow that.
There's not a lot of teams that will probably let Bronny play off the get-go anyway.
I think Charlotte would let that happen. I think Detroit would let that happen.
Yeah,
I think these teams that aren't contending for championships that need to sell tickets, sure, we'll draft Bronny and, we'll play Bronny and LeBron, but you could play 48 minutes a night and they get this tank for another year. But any of these teams serious about winning a championship, this duo is not going to happen on a championship contender.
No, I don't think so either. I don't know where the Lakers go in this term. I don't think LeBron leaves. I don't even know if Bronny gets drafted. I think the only way he gets drafted is because of the name that that precedes him. He didn't really have a great college season at USC this past year, which is why I'm not certain.
I wouldn't put Bronny in the top 2,000 college players this year.
I don't know if he gets taken with a top 60 pick in the draft. I don't even know if it's going to happen. It could happen maybe, but I doubt it.
If there are 350 Division I teams, I would probably put.
Do we know?
Maybe not 2,000. I wouldn't put him top 1,000 for sure. Top 1,000 for sure, because in the upper echelon of college athletics, you have the Power 6, or I guess it's Power 5 now because the Pac-12 no longer exists. Then you have other conferences like the AAC, the Mountain West, the Atlantic 10, which I don't think he would start on any of those teams either.
I think
think he'd track a rotation on a lot of Power 5 teams either.
I think the only thing to monitor is think about this for Bronny too. Remember, he's going into the draft, but he's also retaining his college eligibility, and he's going to enter the portal. So even if he doesn't get drafted, then
I think he should go back to college. I'm not saying he can't be great, but he has to go back to college.
I think what will most likely happen is LeBron will probably come back to the Lakers next year. Bronny will be on a new, he'll go to a new university. I don't know.
Then you see the move.
Then you could see the move happening. I think if Bronny goes into a new system, I know it's completely off the topic from what happened in this series, but Bronny goes to a new college, maybe has a monster second year in college, whether that be at Duke or one of these blue bloods, or if that's where he's going to end up going, who knows. But then you get to stock up in the draft, and then whoever drafts him, then LeBron says, all right, if I really truly, this is the last thing I want to do for my NBA career is play with my son, then that's probably what he ends up doing. And depending on what team it is, I think I guess that would happen at the end of the day. But I don't know. I don't know. Like I said,
These are the implications, though. And I want to say Jokic, his game has kind of, I don't want to say deteriorated, but it's kind of fallen off just ever so slightly. I think he was performing better during the regular season,
yeah.
but he had an all defensive guy like Anthony Davis guarding him for the
I was gonna
entire
say Anthony
series.
Davis gave him a
Now he's
lot of
going to have
problems in
Rudy
the series.
Gobert. So the fact that he's still performing at such a high level when you have defensive player of the year candidates being thrown at him is a testament to
I
his
still
game.
I still think regardless, it is Murray is the X factor for this team.
100%.
Because if you look what happened in Game 1 against the Timberwolves, and I know again it's looking early on, but Murray had a really bad game again, and Denver really never got they came back from a double digit deficit, took the lead at one point, but then they faltered at the end of the game. And I think if Murray doesn't have a good game, then Denver's going to struggle from the field because he's realistically, he's the guy that facilitates the ball to Jokic when needed be. He passes it to Porter Jr. as well, but we know Jokic does the same thing. But he's their outside guy as well as Porter Jr. If they don't start clicking and make shots, then Denver really is in a bad situation where they're going to lose some games, and that's what happened in the fourth quarter against Minnesota, which, again, we'll talk about later on in the show when we're recapping or previewing their series coming up in the second round. And speaking of the Timberwolves, let's talk about their first round matchup with the Phoenix Suns. Now,
Yeah, I was completely wrong about them.
I was very wrong about this too because I expected Phoenix to win this series in
Easily.
6 games. And I said it even when we previewed. I said I don't really have a logistical reasoning as to why I'm picking the Suns. I just feel like it's now or never, and if you don't get it done sooner rather than later, then it's a disaster, and the team might have to be rebuilt again.
So
And
has
you might
this
be at
ruined
that
Kevin
stage.
Durant's has this ruined Kevin Durant's legacy? I think it really does. I think it really puts a stain
I
on
feel
it,
like
and it
people
kind of
put.
solidifies that he cannot be the number one guy no matter where he goes.
I feel like I felt like that was staying years before it's this year. I felt like that was staying when he went to Golden State.
Yeah, but here's the thing: he had that opportunity in Brooklyn, right? For a brief
Yeah,
moment where people would say, "Oh, he could do it," and he's playing with Kyrie, and he has James Harden, and then his foot was on the line, right?
right.
And then
Yeah,
he leaves
he
Brooklyn,
gave
like,
him
okay,
inches,
Brooklyn,
cost him.
because here's the thing: he was not the first one to leave Brooklyn.
Right.
Brooklyn kind of collapsed, and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna get out of here after 4 years." Then he goes to Phoenix. He gets everything he wants. He gets to play with Devin Booker. He gets to play with Bradley Beal. They bring in Nurkic, so they bring in all these other guys to fill out the roster. This is a great roster, but it had one fatal flaw: no point guard.
They don't have a point guard. Yeah,
And I'll be real with you. I think if CP3 was on this team, it
they
would have
would
been
be
a lot
better with
better
CP3. Yeah,
because
100%.
there was too many. Oh man, there were
They're
too many
ball
leaders,
dominant
not enough
guard.
followers. That's what. Listen, like it's working with the Knicks right now. The Knicks have one guy that can go to score right now. And that's Jalen Brunson. It was two when Randall was around, and they have a bunch of really great role players.
Right.
There's really not any bad players on the Knicks. There's just really good role players, and I would say if you took those guys out of those environments, like Dante DiVincenzo or Josh Hart, and you gave them a big starting role on this team, they would be below average stars at best, right? I'm not saying that these guys can get 25 points a game on a night. They definitely can, but I'm saying if they have a focal point of that team, they're not going to get it, and that's what Phoenix kind of severely lacked too.
Well,
Right?
I
They had decent role players, but not those excellent ones, and they really missed
right.
out
The
on a
bench
point guard.
points was a big factor in this series as well, because if you look at Phoenix's, we knew this going into the season that Phoenix was going to have a tough time with their bench. You know, when you're
That was a
rolling
running
Eric
joke.
Gordon out for like 25 to 30 minutes at this stage of his career, I mean, it's not really going to work as often. Then you lose Grayson Allen in the series to an injury, and then you're forced to start. You're forced to start someone off your bench that hasn't been starting all season, which they had to do with Royce O'Neal. I mean, it's not going to
And
work.
they knew they were kind of cooked at the point guard position. Again, no offense, when they signed Isaiah Thomas late in the season.
Right,
Isaiah Thomas hasn't been the same player in about 6 years, ever since that hip injury in the
right.
playoffs.
I
And
mean, look at who they. I mean, just look at
35
their
years old
bench.
too. I mean,
Yeah,
that's that. He didn't get any burn in the playoffs. But yeah, when you look at their bench, Royce O'Neal, Bol, Drew
they have
Eubanks. Not saying that
Thaddeus
they're not.
Young. It's a very old bench. Eric Gordon.
I like Derek Gordon too. I thought that was a great addition that could
No,
have come
he
off
was
the bench, and
fine.
he
He
was
was all
great during the
right.
regular season.
Right.
But regular season basketball and playoff basketball, it's a different animal.
And I think this series also solidified that we saw another coming of the age for Anthony Edwards. He had a monster series against the Suns in this one. And after what he did as well in game one against the Nuggets in round two, Edwards is really on a mission to make sure that Minnesota is going to be a contender for the next 5, 10 years. And
The craziest
they're
thing
looking really good.
about this is he's only 22 years old. So
Right.
barring injuries, you could have a decade of dominance for this guy. You can have a decade of all NBA first team, uh, all star games, all star MVPs, potential MVPs, NBA championships. This is and his demeanor too, right? There are guys in this league like Devin Booker and Jason Tatum that they want to be Kobe and MJ so badly. Anthony Edwards, he just has it.
Yeah.
Like he's been in the league for a couple of years now. He got off to a slow start the first 2 years, and by slow start I mean average 20 points roughly in the first 2 seasons of his career. Now going into the playoffs, 33 points a game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists on 54 almost 50-40-90 splits. This is the closest thing to MJ that we have in the modern day. From his demeanor, his attitude, the way he plays the game. The closest thing, would you agree? For closest thing that we have to a young MJ is Anthony Edwards right now. Not saying that he is MJ.
No,
Not saying that he's MJ
that's a
was
bold
going to be,
statement.
but the attitude he has and the way he plays the game.
No, I mean he goes about the game in a fun way, which is really if you're a Timberwolf fan, this is a fun time to
It's
watch.
pure basketball too. A lot of stars in the NBA, like Joel M. Free Throw, or it's Karl Anthony Towns, or it's a lot of these guys don't have the how can I
The
say this?
aura.
They like the aura of it, right? Like some guys that just have it, right? Like Josh Hart, he's just a guy that has it, right? Even though he's not a star, he just has it. Anthony Edwards also a guy that's not hunting for free throws, so he's not playing like James Harden. He's not playing like Trae Young. He's not playing like Joel Embiid. He's a guy that just wants to go out there, go in the paint. Maybe he'll shoot 6 or 7 a night, and you know what? If he's going to shoot 23, 25 shots a night, he should get 7, 8 free throws a night. That just makes sense to me.
Right. And think about this for the Timberwolves as well. Chris Finch, a great year for this squad, and they could have easily been the 1 seed had not some tiebreakers gone in their way. But not only this, but they win their first playoff series since 2004 as well by doing this, and they did it in a very convincing fashion over this Phoenix Suns team that who knows what they do now in the offseason where does Durant maybe ask for a trade? What do they do with Bradley Beal? Because there's a lot of salary cap that's tied into their top 3 players. They have a Devin Booker, you never know. He might want out too. They're just they're going into a rough offseason if you're
Yep,
Phoenix.
and the Knicks series wasn't even over, and they were saying, "Oh, Devin Booker to the Knicks because Knicks for clicks."
Yeah,
And
first thing is something else better to talk about.
It's crazy too because his teammates are calling him a young Michael Jordan too, like Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Kevin Garnett said that, a former Timberwolf legend.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the comparisons on social media, but he himself says he can never be compared to him. And I kind of respect that.
Yeah, it's tough.
But I'll compare him to '84 MJ when MJ was 22 years old, 23 years old. I think that's a fair comparison. I'm not saying, oh yeah, he's going to be the Michael Jordan of the '90s Bulls, but I feel like from a 1984 perspective, 40 years ago, yeah, it's the closest thing we have.
I mean, listen, the Timberwolves keep playing the way they're playing, and they maybe knock out Denver in the second round. They got a realistic shot of maybe winning an NBA championship this season. They have a really good team on paper. That, as like you and I both said, we did not give them enough credit going into this round one matchup with Phoenix. We thought Phoenix would surely get this done because, like we said, if it didn't get done, then everything would go
I said
downhill.
this before. My main concern was with Karl Anthony Towns because he had shown up. He had never shown up in the playoffs before,
and he was coming off an injury too.
He was coming off an injury. It was disappointing season after disappointing season. It seems like he's finally had time to buy into the system. Naz Reid has been phenomenal. Jaden McDaniels has been phenomenal. Rudy Gobert,
great series.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert is a guy that has always taken that defensive role. I know a lot of people hate him. He scores 14 points a game, but guess what? If he's going to play that kind of defense inside the paint, and you have a perimeter defender like a Jay McDaniels, like a Anthony Edwards on your team, he doesn't have to go outside the paint, right?
And
that's just how it is.
Guard in Mike Conley too,
yeah, a great defensive point guard, Mike Conley, still up there in age, and I'm hoping if the Knicks can't win a ring, I'd love to see him win a ring.
Yeah.
Just a classy player.
Yeah. And then that leads us to the final first round matchup. And I know, Jonathan, this might be a tough one for you to talk about because of you've had some affiliation with this team, but the Dallas Mavericks defeat the Los Angeles Clippers in 6 games in a series where Kawhi Leonard was pretty much out for the entire series. Did play, I believe, in games 2 and 3, missed game 1, and then missed the rest of the series after game 3. And the Clippers just, I don't know where they go now from here. They lose in 6 games to Dallas. They had plenty of opportunities in this series as well to win it. And, they almost blew a big lead in I think that was game number 4, where the Mavericks were down
It's almost a
as many
30
as,
point lead.
right, 30 points in that game. And if not for Harden at the end, they lose that game probably. But
Yeah, James
Luka,
Harden really turned back the clock that game.
yeah, Harden and Paul George had a pretty good series overall for the Clippers in this one. But it came down to it is that they just really couldn't get the job done after those top two. And Kyrie and Luka, they had themselves a monster series as well for Dallas. They move on to the second round and now take on the Oklahoma City Thunder.
This is
And
sad too.
yeah,
Not to cut you off, because
no,
Kawhi
go for it.
Leonard plays almost the entire season. He qualifies for all NBA awards. He's going to get one this year. He's going to get an all NBA team. He might get an all defensive team. He tries to play 2 games during the playoffs, and clearly he wasn't healthy. They shut him down for the season, and it's his career ever since getting pretty much injured by Zaza Pachulia has never been the same. Right? He had that one comeback season in Toronto where they were able, with load management and a couple of I don't want to say lucky breaks in the playoffs, because you had a lot of players get injured, especially Golden State. Klay Thompson was out, Kevin Durant was out, so they got a lucky break there. But ever since that Zaza injury, it really hasn't been the same for him.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? What do you think Clippers go from here now? Do you think they lose Ty Lue to the Lakers? Because I know he's been rumored to be maybe the new head coach of the Lakers if poached away. But then again, the Clippers, I think, have also been rumored to say that they're not going to allow him to interview for that job as well. So, what do you think the Clippers now do? Do they, I guess, try to run it back with this roster?
So it's very strange because they're building the state of the art stadium, right?
Right.
And I don't know when it's going to be ready. If it's going to be ready in a season, then yes, they should not blow it up. And this is going to be a weird reason, but you have to trust me on this. If it's not going to be available for another 3 to 4 years, I think they should blow it up now. And this is why. They're going to debut the wall with the season tickets, where this is, by the way, the best deal in sports. For $1,200 a year, and for an extra, I think $800. So I think for $2,000, you can get you and any one of your friends on any given game get access to Clippers games in this wall, where it is like 55 rows, 20, 30 seats deep, and it goes all the way up the opposing baseline. And only Clipper fans can be allowed in there. It's going to be a great environment. They're trying to replicate what they have over in Europe with their soccer teams. And I believe if it's not going to be ready in for another couple of years, you blow it up now and you start rebuilding, and you give the city something to get excited about, right? That exciting young core, rather than, oh boy, we got to trot out Paul George, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and the rest of the retirement home here, and maybe we can make the second round. You want something young and exciting? I think you blow it up now, and if you get to that point a couple of years from now, the players will see the environment. You're still living in LA. You have an owner that's not afraid to spend money on his
Well,
team.
right.
I think you should blow up. I think
But here's
you
the
should blow it up
problem
here.
with blowing it up. Remember
I know they
what
don't
they
have any
did?
draft picks.
They traded all those picks away to Oklahoma City. So they're in such a bad spot with that.
Yeah, and I know they trade all those picks away, but you could still get multiple first round picks for Paul George.
Right,
and
you
Kawhi
can definitely
Leonard.
get picks for those
You
players.
could between
no
all those
question about
guys
it.
they could probably get 12 first round picks back. So I'm not really going to sweat
Probably.
it. So I mean, listen, if the return on goods is good right now, if your return on value is high, you should cash that in right now, because PG-13 just had a great series. James Harden looks like he can still be a contributing member of a playoff team, either as a starter or a six-man. Russell Westbrook is a negative asset. I'm sorry to say that. And Kawhi Leonard looks like he can at least put people in seats. So I could see a team that wants to make it, maybe like an Orlando Magic, bringing in Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. I can see a maybe even a team like, let's say, the Sacramento Kings, right? A team that really desperately wants to shake it up. They have a young core, and they maybe just need a mentor around those players, right? Someone that can be the second or third guy on that team and serve as a mentor with the playoff experience, and because that goes a long way in the NBA. Just on the
Right.
day to day living, the grind of the season during the for 6 to 8 months, and then kind of managing all that. So, especially these younger teams, right? Maybe you do see Paul George go back to OKC. That'd be kind of ironic, but I don't know if that would happen. But I would cash it in. I would cash him in for first round picks. That's what I would do. And with the way drafting is capable today, you can get all stars in at the 15th and 20th pick. You can get all NBA players at the end of the first round. It's significantly harder, but it's not like it's a surefire thing. Oh yeah, well, you take the number one or number two overall player in this draft class, they're going to be an all star. It's definitely not an exact science.
Yeah. I don't know. The Clippers. I just feel like the Clippers are in a bad spot.
Think you got to
And
blow it up and then build get some young players in there. Even if they
yeah,
win 2 years from now, they blow it up completely. In 2 or 3 years from now, they win 40 games. That I think with a young enough roster, that's enough to excite the fan base when that wall kind of gets built and they want to be part of that environment. That's that state of the art stadium. It'll be enough. So I think they should blow it up now and start rebuilding towards the future
yeah.
because they're not going to win a championship at this point. I think that window's closed.
It does seem to be the case for the Clippers in that scenario. But let's now move on to the Eastern Conference, and I don't think we'll really go too much into this series just because of how, pretty much it was all Celtics in this one. They dominated the Miami Heat at 5 games. The Heat didn't have Jimmy Butler in this series after he got injured in a play-in game. But Boston does lose Kristaps Porzingis in the series. He most likely will not be playing in the second round against the Cleveland Cavaliers as well. So we might not see Kristaps till the Eastern Conference Finals if the Celtics get past Cleveland. But they do still win this series. Derek White had a pretty good showing in this series as well for Boston. Tatum and Jaylen Brown did their work as they usually do. Porzingis, up until the point he got hurt, was doing great things. And on the other side of things for Miami, I mean, I think they're another team where they're going they go into an offseason where
They don't need to blow it up though. They just need to
they're not going to
retool.
blow it up, but
They have too many young assets.
But you could see the writing on the wall kind of for this team where it seems sooner rather than later some of these guys are going to be going. And Jimmy Butler might be that first guy. There's been rumors that he might not be on the Heat next year and might be
No,
going to a different team.
yeah, Pat Riley pretty much told him to shut his. I think the direct quote is to keep your mouth shut.
He did.
Especially after saying, "Oh yeah, I would have beaten the Knicks. I would have beaten the Sixers. Yada yada yada." It's listen, when you're not in a playoff series, it is very easy to run your mouth, right? Because there's no hypotheticals, right?
Right.
It was something different when Larry Bird or Michael Jordan they were mid game talking trash, Kevin Garnett talking trash, right? Because you are not only are you physically invested, you're emotionally invested, but your reputation's on the line. By Jimmy Butler saying that he had nothing to gain and he kind of lost more by saying that. Pat Riley is the boss and his players listen to him. He's built a quote unquote successful culture down there. You can kind of fill in the blanks over there, but
And they won some championships, so I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think heat culture is a myth though. It's more about injuring players, especially in this series. I know they didn't injure Kristaps in this particular series. I know it's another injury,
They
but
were trying. They almost got Jason Tatum injured.
yeah, we almost got Jay. Listen, and we're gonna talk about dirty players when I talk about Embiid too, because I think he's the dirtiest player in the league, dirtier than Draymond. But based on personal experiences, I've been to a lot of even in not only just watching them on TV. I've been to Knicks Heat's playoff games. I've been to Knicks Heat regular season a bunch of times. I feel like every single game I watch, a Knicks Heat game, someone's trying to injure someone,
Hmm.
and maybe it's a small anecdote, but they're definitely one of the dirtier teams in the league. And I'm glad this team should have gotten swept.
Yeah. Boston just had a bad game too, and that's really what led the Heat to winning that game too.
And they were nuclear from three that game.
Right.
So it was a kind of
The
best
Heat
case
had
scenarios for them.
right. I
And
think the
that
Heat had
wasn't
like
happened three more
23
times.
threes or something in that game.
Yeah.
Like they shot insane from the 3-point line in that one. I think we saved the Knicks series for last, Johnson, because I know you and I will go into a lengthy detail for that one.
Yep.
So let's go to the next series between the Pacers and the Bucks. Now we knew going into this series the Bucks would be out with Giannis Antetokounmpo. So they were trying to get him to play later on in the series. We'll talk about that just a little bit. But game one saw a monster game from Damian Lillard, a big reason why the Bucks won that game one. And then the Pacers kind of picked up momentum after that first game. Rick Carlisle called up the team and said, we're not ready for the playoffs. It doesn't look like we're a playoff-ready team after this game one performance. And they showed up the next three games. They beat them in the next three. Damian Lillard got hurt. And then it seems that the Pacers had everything, they had it locked on. Milwaukee puts up a monster game five performance up, at home, forces the game six in Indiana. They get Damian Lillard back for that game. There was a chance that maybe Giannis could play in that game number six. Was not going to be the case. They were hopeful that if they won the game, maybe he would play in game seven, but Indiana dominated in this game six. They won 120-98 to close it out in 6 games to move on to the second round. And a series where we saw a lot of, breakout stars for the Indiana Pacers. You had Miles Turner have some big games. Pascal Siakam, we know from years past, his playoff experience, had a monster series. Tyrese Halliburton, really strong series as well. Even Obi Toppin in game number 6, the former Knick, he had a monster game off the bench for New York. I almost said for New York, but for Indiana, when Miles Turner and Siakam both got into foul trouble, they needed someone off the bench to provide a spark, and Obi Toppin delivered that spark for this team. And Indiana took advantage of the injuries as well of the Bucks in this one, moving on to the second round, and they'll be facing the New York Knicks in the second round as well. So a very familiar playoff opponent that they'll be playing in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Gonna put another page in that historic playoff rivalry,
Yeah,
and write another chapter in that book. But going back to Milwaukee here, they got to blow it up. They gotta blow it up.
I was going to ask you, what do you think they do now?
It's not going to be by choice either. And there are some really classy guys on that team, like Chris Middleton, who's overcome so much. Even though I think he's only been a one-time All-Star or a two, or maybe a 2 or 3-time All-Star. Hall of Good, but not Hall of Fame player. He's up there.
So many injuries with him.
Yeah, so many injuries. That's why he's such a likable guy, and he's had to overcome so much in his career. So for him to be NBA All-Star a couple times, win a championship, it's a great story. Man. But he's getting up there in age. Dame's getting up there in age. Giannis has already said he's not happy with the way it's going. And he probably has 3 to 4 more years left in his tank at the way he plays the game. He relies heavily on athleticism. And if he can put in a defensive system that he could thrive in, kind of similar to the New York Knicks and Fib system, but I'm not saying we can get him. So I think Giannis will want out, and they'll have no choice to rebuild. That's my opinion. If they would have kept a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, who would have known Dante DiVincenzo would have been such a great 3-point specialist? I know he was drafted there. He was on Golden State and Sacramento before this, but this is why it's important to kind of maintain the talent you draft, because here he is now 7 years later, and he's making big plays in the playoffs, and they could have used a guy like him. If they had Dante DiVincenzo, I think they could have won this playoff series. I don't think that's too crazy to say that.
I think their biggest problem was they couldn't stop the pace that the Pacers played at. After game one, they did a great job of slowing them down, and then it just seemed as if they lost that entire mentality the rest of the series.
I just do want to bring up that in game one, Dame shot of something like 2 or 14.
Oh yeah, Dame was insane in game. No, game one.
Game one, I think he shot.
Dame had a monster game one. No.
Oh, I'm thinking of the game before. No. Dame, no. I'm thinking of No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the overtime game. Excuse me.
Right. No, Dame had, I think, 34 at halftime or 35 at halftime.
Yeah. No, game one he was very good, because that's the game they actually ended up winning.
Right.
Yeah. No, my apologies.
I think Dame. You know what it was? Dame had. You can make the case. Game one and game two, Dame played great.
He was very good, and then
he got hurt, and then he struggled in the next couple of games. Game 6, he wasn't that bad. I mean, it could have been better, but he wasn't that horrific. The problem was, after Dame, they really didn't have a number 2 scorer to,
yeah, which is why a guy like Dante DiVincenzo really would have been helpful. And we'll see that. I guess we'll try to see that tonight of the Knicks game, see how they could keep that pace. Spoiler alert: Knicks won the series. If you haven't heard,
you already mentioned it twice. So yeah,
yeah. If you haven't been paying attention, or you've been living on their rock the last couple of days. Knicks won the series, but
Yeah.
yeah, they got to blow it up. Pacers move on to the next round. Pascal Siakam and I don't even want to say Tyrese Halliburton was the third best player on his own team this
No,
year.
yeah. I would say it was Siakam,
Miles
then it was
Turner.
Turner, then it was Halliburton. You could make the case as well. TJ McConnell off the bench had a pretty good series as well.
Yeah,
And
I
then I
won't go
mentioned
that
Obi
far though and
Toppin.
say that
No,
And listen,
sure.
I was always an Obi Toppin advocate. I thought at his peak he would be a 16-8 player in the NBA. He still hasn't really shown that yet, but his per 36 kind of alludes to that for his career, and that's what he's shaping up to be. And if he ends up being a guy where, oh yeah, you bring him off the bench, 12 points, 5 rebounds,
Yeah.
hits a couple threes, energy guy, can catch a couple lobs or two, allergic to defense. Sure, great, that could be a good NBA career,
It's
but
a different stress, style of contrast between the Knicks and the Pacers, and we'll preview that in a little bit. And there's a
talk about
reason
you want to talk
why
about
I say that.
Ebony and Ivory, like complete opposites. That is as close you can get. Knicks plays either the second or the slowest pace of play in the league,
That's
and
what
the
I'm saying.
Pacers are one or
The
two.
Knicks have the
So
worst pace of the league, and the Pacers are the number one.
I won't say the worst pace because
No, it is the worst pace.
our pace wins games. Though it's just the
No, I know,
slowest
but no,
pace.
but I'm saying
It's the slowest pace.
it is the slowest pace in the NBA. It's not even like
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
saying that.
listen. It's a
It's
throwback to watching a
statistically the
nine. It's
worst, the
throwback to
slowest.
watching a '90s game. That's what it is.
That's what Tim's style is. But like I
Metal
said,
bats.
yeah, exactly. The last series we'll go into before the next series in round one is the Cleveland and Orlando series that just wrapped up yesterday. That went to Game 7, and it didn't look like it was going to go to Game 7 the way the first two games went for Cleveland. They pretty much dominated the Magic in those first two games, go up 2-0 in the series. Then things got interesting once it went to Orlando. The Magic would tie the series at 2 games apiece. Game number 5 went down to the wire. It was a 1-point win for Cleveland in that Game 5 to then set up a Game 6 back on Orlando. The Magic, despite a 50-point performance from Donovan Mitchell, the Magic would get a Game 6 win to force that Game 7 just yesterday. And in that Game 7 yesterday, it looked like the Magic had this game won. They had a double-digit lead early on in the game. Cleveland could not get any shots going. At one point, they had more turnovers than they had made field goals. And it just seems that the Cavaliers were going to falter after losing in the first round last year. They're going to lose in the first round once again. But credit to Donovan Mitchell once again in this scheme and for this entire series. Mitchell with a 39-point performance in game number 7. And that's despite the fact, if you look around him, Darius Garland had a rough game 7. He had to have a big third quarter from Max Strus really helped him as well. Evan Mobley had a nice overall performance in this game. And the Cavaliers defense really intensified after that first half. They win game 7 by the final of 106-94. And another thing where the Magic are you can see the inexperience playing in this game as well. After Banchero, Orlando just didn't really have much consistent shooting from their entire team. Franz Wagner had a rough game 7, Jalen Suggs as well. And a very valiant, effort from the Orlando entirely from this entire season and in this playoff. No one expected them to be the 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. No one expected them to get to game 7 in the first round and to put themselves in a position to win that first round series. But at the end of the day, Cleveland gets the job done, and now they will go on to take on the Celtics in the second round of the playoffs.
I don't think the best team won this series, and I don't think that's a bold statement. You mentioned Paolo Banchero having really nothing after him. He didn't even play that well that game. He shot under 40%. Franz Wagner, 2 of 14. Yeah, you listen, 38 points is good, but when you got to take...
But in fairness, he had to put up a lot of those shots because no one around him was shooting. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And no, they were shooting. This one's shooting efficiently.
They weren't shooting the ball in. Yeah,
Franz Wagner,
no
2 of 14. Listen, if the Orlando Magic even shoot halfway decent that game, we're talking about another epic collapse for Cleveland. That's what we're talking about.
No, I agree.
But we have to, the facts are facts. And Darius Garland this series, after playing against mediocre point guards in Markelle Fultz and Jalen Suggs, listen, the comparisons to prime Mo Williams and Darius Garland have been brought up. They're not too far off. And the fact that Mo Williams 15 years ago played at a much slower pace than the current NBA is.
I'm not willing to go there yet, but
listen, I'm not willing to go there yet, but the shades are there.
I know what you're getting at. I'm not willing to go there. I need to see what happens with him in round 2.
Yeah, I
because
mean,
you're in a
listen,
different,
right?
you're going to be facing a different environment in Boston where we know what happened last year. Remember with this team, they said even themselves they could not handle the environment of playing in New York. Now they're facing another similar environment in Boston. That's another tough element for this team to go on the road, especially in the first two games, to try to figure out how you could beat this team, especially a team that won 60 plus games.
Yeah, all I'm gonna say is Nick, Darius Garland this past season with the pace of play being as
I
high as
know,
it ever been,
I know,
18-6. Prime Mo Williams, 18-4.
I know,
It's that is very concerning. I'm not saying he can't be a great player, but time's kind of ticking right now. He's been in the league for a couple of years. Been here for almost 5 years at this point.
I know. Like I said, I'm not ready to go there just yet. Not willing to do that yet. But what I am willing to do is talk about the next series finally. Let's talk about that first round series with the Sixers that you and I both agree took years off of our life because of how close every single game was in this series. Game one, the Knicks win by 7. They saw a monster game from Josh Hart. Jalen Brunson struggled in this game, and the
Really,
Knicks
the first
made
two games he struggled immensely.
well, I was going to get to game two. I'm going to get there in a second. The Knicks really needed Josh Hart as well as Miles McBride in this game to win this game. McBride had 21 off the bench. Hart had 22 and 13. They both made some big shots down the end of the game, and they win game one of 111-104. Now, earlier I alluded to that game two game between the Knicks and the 76ers, a game which Philadelphia pretty much had all wrapped up. They had a 5-point lead with 28 seconds left. Jalen Brunson, another rough game from him as well, as you mentioned. Made up his first three-pointer of the night, or one of his first, I think it was his first three actually of the night, that he made down the stretch of that game to make it a 2-point game. The Sixers inbound the ball, turnover happens, the whole controversy of did he call a timeout, did he not? All, a non-factor regardless of what happens because of who you ask at this point. The Knicks force the turnover. Dante DiVincenzo gets an open shot, misses it. Hartenstein gets a rebound, gets another kick out from Anunoby. DiVincenzo gets a second opportunity, makes the three, gives the Knicks the lead, and they would hold on to win that game 2, 104-101, and have a 2-0 lead in the series. And the Knicks fans were feeling great going into game number 3. Then game 3 was very hectic. Joel Embiid puts up 50 points. Should have been kicked out of the game early on after, grabbing onto the leg of Mitchell Robinson, and should have been called for a flagrant 2 and been ejected from the game. That did not happen, and B goes on to have that 50-point performance. Brunson, at least for the Knicks in this game, had a monster game, a 39-point performance. They were bounced back after having a bad game 1 in game number 2. Game 4 then happens, and that's where Jalen Brunson continues to keep cooking for the Knicks in this series after that first 2-game slump. 47 points for Brunson in this game, breaking the most single points in a Knicks playoff game in their franchise's history. He puts up 47 of the Knicks' 97 points in the game. They win 97-92 to go up 3-1 and then go back home. We mentioned it last week on the show, Johnson. You were there for game number 5 between these two teams. The Knicks have a 6-point lead. Looks like they have it all wrapped up. Then Tyrese Maxey, who you and I both agree had a monster performance for the Sixers up until that game 6 of the series. First 5 games, Maxey was unstoppable for Philadelphia. And in this final stretch of game 5, gets a 4-point play to make it a 2-point game. He then hits a half-court heave, or pretty much at the logo of the Knicks, to tie the game with 7 seconds left. The Knicks could not make the buzzer beater. Game goes to overtime. Sixers take advantage and win in overtime, 112-106, to force a game 6. And again, the momentum of the Knicks, it looked like they were done after losing that game 5. They were still winning the series, but it looked like the Knicks were all but they're done. Game 6 happens. The Knicks start off with a monster game. 33-11 was the score at one point for New York in that game. Then everything went downhill. The Sixers came back. They had a double-digit lead at one point, 71-61. Thankfully for the Knicks, they were able to make some big shots down the stretch of the third quarter to go into the fourth quarter trailing, I believe, by just 2 points, or I think the game was tied maybe up until that point. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but the Knicks get some clutch shooting down the stretch in the fourth quarter. OG Anunoby had a monster fourth quarter performance. Yeah, Josh Hart make the game-winning 3. DiVincenzo had a monster game 6. And Brunson puts up another 41 points. Hartenstein as well also had a pretty good performance in this game. And despite Embiid's best efforts in this Game 6 performance, with Tyrese Maxey not shooting the way he had been shooting in the first 5 games, he struggles in this game as well. That cost really the Sixers this game. And also, after those top 2 guys, the only other production they really got out of the team was from Buddy Hield off of the bench, who most of the series did not play against the Knicks. But for our sake, the Knicks did hold on in 6 games. They move on to the second round of the playoffs to take on the Indiana Pacers. And after all that, we can breathe a sigh of relief and not have to worry about facing Joel Embiid for the rest of this postseason.
I'm not even scared of Embiid. I'm just more angry with Embiid because he now has
Yeah,
he has a history of being a dirty player.
Right.
He injured or attempted to injure multiple players this series, whether it was the double tap on Josh Hart's ankle. Brunson, he hit multiple people in the groin and in the face. He literally injured Mitchell Robinson.
And you can make the case that elbow to the face really woke up Brunson in game 4.
I said
Brunson went on a tear after that.
That reminded me of when Kemba was playing at UConn back in 2011 when they went on the run. And I forget what round it was. I think it might have been the round of 16. Someone shoulder checked him and they were down by 10. And then he just woke up. That was it. You poked the bear. And that's what really reminded me of. I know it's a completely different situation. Still a high-stakes game. But that's what reminded me of Kemba Walker about 15 years ago, about 12, 13 years ago. Joel Embiid has more flagrants than Draymond Green in his NBA career, despite playing in 5 seasons less worth of games. He took almost 80 free throws in 6 games. That's absolutely disgusting. Tobias Harris is one of the worst playoff performances from a max player I've ever seen in my life. To put it nicely, $180 million man, and you get 0 points
next year. He will
$180 million, and you put up 0 points in Game 4.
He was pretty much MIA the entire series.
And I will say, Joel Embiid, in Game 5, even though the Knicks didn't win that game, he was completely shook. I was there live in person. This guy didn't have
9 turnovers.
10 points into the third quarter. He almost had a quadruple double, even though they won this game. He just kept on throwing the ball into the crowd.
They shouldn't
He
have
had
won
no confidence whatsoever. And yeah, Maxey pretty much just went on another level, and that sometimes happens. You have to kind of tip your cap to score 8 points in 24 seconds, doing his best Reggie Miller impersonation.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of tip your cap. And I think it was disgraceful of Sixers ownership to buy 2,500 games. I'm not saying that giving 2,500 tickets to first responders is a bad thing. That's a good thing. But to kind of do that just to make sure Knicks fans don't take over your arena during a playoff game, a time of year where your fans should be showing up. We're not asking people to show up a game Wednesday night at 8:30. We're asking for a Sunday afternoon, and you don't have and your team and your players and I'm sorry, your fans can't show up, so you have to buy 2,500 extra tickets to make sure Knicks fans can't show up. And by the way, they still did show up. They showed up, and it was a 50-50 crowd on that first game. Game number 4, or game number 3, or it was game number 4. Excuse me.
Game number 4 was more. The Knicks.
You could argue with 60-40.
Game number 3, but Knicks had more fans. It felt like a game number 4.
Yeah, you could argue it was 65-35 crowd. You could argue that was a neutral site game that had more Knicks fans there, like an NCAA tournament game.
Right.
Game 6, you maybe 60-40 Philadelphia fans, but there's still probably tens of thousands, not tens of thousands, but thousands of Knicks fans in the stadium for Game 6. I think if they don't buy those tickets, it's probably a Knicks crowd again.
Right. I think what really solidified the series for me also is that Maxey has now started to get into that. Oh, he's like really, really good type of player. Like we knew
he's arrived. This was his arrival.
This was like this series alone was insane. I know we had a bad Game 6, and that you could make the case it was the reason why the Sixers didn't win the game or the series. But look at what he did the first 5 games, and that even in Game 5, 46 points at the Garden. Those are games that you talk about for years for your entire career. How many of the greatest players in the NBA have had their monster games in MSG against the Knicks that you go back on and say, wow, this guy scored 60 or whatever, or 70 or a 50-point performance in MSG. This guy had a near 50-point performance in the playoffs against the Knicks. And if not for him, the Sixers lose that Game 5 and the Knicks win that, end the series earlier than they had hoped for.
A player could score 101 points on the Knicks in Madison Square Garden as long as they lose that game. I don't really care.
I think the only thing to know for also is that the series was so close because if you look at how the point differential was for this entire series, Johnson, do you know what the point differential was for the series?
I believe it was one.
It was one. It was 650 to 649 in favor of the Knicks.
Yep.
So it was that close. These two teams were very well,
And the only
competitive
reason
and well
why it was
matched.
that close because this really should have been a sweep, but during game I think it was game 3, uh Philadelphia, not only did they get the ref treatment that game because I felt like they were slighted, but
Especially after game two, how it happened at game
yeah,
two.
they
Yeah,
got and they it was a mix of they got the ref treatment and no, by the way, it doesn't even matter about game 2 because if we want to really get petty, game 6 shouldn't have happened because I was a travel on Tyrese Maxey during game 5, so that shouldn't have never
right.
even happened. But we're not gonna go into
Again,
that.
the Knicks shouldn't have been in that situation either. Shouldn't have
Like
allowed
Tibbs said, I
the
want to
four
see
point play should never
Tibbs
happen.
said I'm interested in the 46-minute report, not really the 2-minute report.
Right.
And that just
Like
kind
I
of
said,
goes to his attention to detail.
the three to tie the game short, they shouldn't have allowed the 4 point play. That's really what I was annoyed by at that sequence because that should never happen.
It was a travel. It was
No, no,
travel.
no. He traveled on the three that tie the game. It wasn't the 4 point play.
Well, I knew one of them was a travel. I
Right.
can't say I took. Oh my god, I got to
Right.
look at this 2-minute report because I just
You
knew the
know.
Knicks kind of blew that game.
Yeah.
I wasn't blaming the refs or anything like that. Okay, the Knicks just got to play better. But yeah, during game 3, it was a mix of okay, it was ref ball, and they went absurd from 3. I mean, they went at one point they were shooting almost 90% from the field in the third quarter. So you're not going to combine that with ref ball. You're not going to win that game, no matter how many points you score. But I think that kind of wraps up our review here of the first
It
round. We can go
does.
into our second round preview, and we can
Yes.
keep this short and sweet.
Yeah, we got the
Uh,
next game coming up in just about 24 minutes, so we do need to get this one a little bit wrapped up quickly here. So we do apologize for the shortened version of this mushing hour, but
Pushing hours are
duty.
never long anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But like we said, duty calls. We need to watch this game one of the Knicks and the Pacers. So we'll talk about that series in just a little bit. Let's go into the Western Conference first, Johnson. OKC versus Dallas. We know OKC swept New Orleans in their first round matchup. They've had a pretty much lengthy rest since that first round matchup. They now take on the Dallas Mavericks to beat the Clippers in 6 games. Who do you have winning the second round matchup to move on to the Western Conference Finals?
Christian, cover your ears. I have Dallas in 7.
Ooh,
I think this Dallas team is extremely gritty. They have playoff experience. They have a perennial MVP candidate in Luka Doncic. Kyrie Irving is doing his thing, especially in the playoffs. I think they have what it takes. I think OKC is young, and even though Luka is only 25 years old or something like that, he's still been in the NBA for 6 years or so. He's a grizzled vet. He's a grizzled vet in his mid-20s right now. So you don't really get that kind of experience often. Probably since LeBron actually. Jeez, have you had a guy this young and this successful into his career? So I think they could steal it here. I think they were going to lose to the Clippers, and I think they kind of proved me wrong there. So I'm gonna go ride the hot hand. I'm gonna say Dallas over here. I don't think OKC's been challenged enough.
I had Dallas in the first round in 6 games. I got it pretty much right on the hit the nail in the coffin with their first round matchup. I didn't really give good reasoning as to why Dallas would win. I just had a hunch, and I guess that
Hey,
hunch was Kawhi
for
Leonard getting
you to
hurt.
hit that, your implied odds of actually getting that right are less than 10%. And
Yeah,
I want to point out that you did it right in 4 different series, so that's insane. You did Mavs in 6, Nuggets in 5, Pacers in 6, Boston in 5. I'm
yeah.
sorry. Yeah, and Boston in 5.
And
You
if
almost out
not,
of the Knicks, though. You had Knicks in 7, you had Cavs in 6, and you had OKC in 7.
yeah, I thought OKC was going to play
Yeah,
someone
you could have
different.
went 5 for 6, or you could have done really, really well, but you still did insane calling it all like that.
So
So
the
let's see if we
question
can keep
is,
it up.
can I keep it up in the second round? I don't think I'm going to. I'm having trouble with this entire playoff second round, and this one I think in particular is the toughest one for me, Dallas and OKC, because I like Dallas's opportunity to win this. I think with the experience that they have, I think they get. I think they can get it done. And they proved me right in the first round, and we saw what they've done in years prior, especially when we thought they didn't want to beat the Phoenix Suns a couple years ago. They dominated the Suns in that game 7 and 1 to move on. Do I think they can get it done against OKC? I don't think they do. I think OKC is got so much more depth than Dallas does, which is why I don't like Dallas in this series. I thought that Dallas set was a little bit more depth better than what the Clippers were, which is why I thought Dallas could win that, and they ended up doing the case. I agree with you. I think this goes 7 games as well, but I have OKC in 7 beating Dallas and move on to the Western Conference Finals.
Okay, so we both agree that this will be a 7-game
It will be a very
slugfest.
lengthy series. I agree. I do agree with that. This one next series as well could be very lengthy, and we saw the Nuggets in game number 1 fall the Timberwolves off a 43-point performance from Anthony Edwards. Do you think, Johnson, this continues for the Timberwolves? They're already up 1-0 in this series so far. Do they go up 2-0 potentially and move on to the Western Conference Finals again one step closer? Or do you think Denver comes back after losing game 1 to go back to another trip to the Western Conference Finals?
Nuggets in 7. I said this. The game 1 win was not going to impact my pick here. I always had Nuggets in 7 the second I saw this series. And it's crazy that Tim Connolly is pretty much responsible for this. He was the former Denver GM. Now he's with Minnesota. He drafted and traded away Gobert in Denver. He drafted Jokic. He hired Mike Malone. He drafted MPJ. He drafted Jamal Murray. He traded for Aaron Gordon. And then when he went to Minnesota, he trades for Gobert. He trades for Conley. Trades for Nikhil Walker. So he's pretty much responsible for both of these series right now. So that's
Right.
kind of cool. So this is the Tim Connolly Bowl. I'm going to call it
Yeah,
that
he's
for
he's
the
enjoying this
non-casuals
one.
out there. But yeah, give me Nuggets in 7 here.
I want to make this bold prediction, Johnson, because I had Denver originally in the NBA Finals. I I felt like I'd done the Timberwolves so wrong for what I said to them in the first round of the playoffs that I need to vindicate that. I'm going to go with the Timberwolves in 6 games, and
6.
I'm going to have them in 6. I think they get it done on home court. I think Denver does win tonight because game 2 is happening after the Knicks game. I think Timberwolves get it done in 6 games, and I'll make the bold prediction. I think they go to the NBA Finals this season. I think this is the year
I think
Minnesota
the first
goes.
team that strings together 2 wins is going to be the team that wins this series.
I think whoever wins this series, and this is no disrespect to OKC or even Dallas, I think whoever wins this series is going to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I
These are
agree.
two very well coached teams.
This is the real NBA playoff of Western Conference
This is the
Finals
real.
right here.
This feels like the real Western Conference Finals. Remember, if not for playoff tiebreakers, this could have been the Western Conference Finals for sure. But OKC got the benefit of the doubt with the tiebreakers. We'll save the Knicks for last shots. I think everyone knows we're going to go with that one, but we'll spike you that in just a bit. How about Boston and Cleveland in that first round matchup? Without Porzingis, does that affect
Celtics in 6?
Celtics?
This would be the team where they kind of cannibalize themselves, so them being the Celtics. I could see Cleveland winning this series, especially because they don't, with no Kristaps, they won't have an answer for Jared Allen. They won't have an answer for Evan Mobley in the paint. You're really going to have to rely on your perimeter defense with Derek White and Drew Holiday to kind of carry you like that. Can they stop Donovan Mitchell? Probably, but that's what I'm going to go with the Celtics here. Barring a potential miracle, give me Celtics in 6.
I'm going to go with Celtics in 5. I have no faith in Cleveland at the end of the day.
I think they can get 2 games.
They could potentially get 2, but I'm worried about what happened to them last season is going to happen to them again, where they couldn't handle the playoff environment of a big name city. And you've already seen guys like Garland, who we mentioned earlier, struggling this postseason so far. Then you're having to rely on guys like Max Strus and Evan Mobley, maybe, to be your next best scorer. And Donovan Mitchell could only really do so much for this team. I think Boston's just too well-rounded and better than Cleveland as a team. That's not really saying much because we know how the Celtics are this season. But I just don't like Cleveland's chances in this series. I think Al Horford is good enough to stop a guy like Jared Allen, who's had some injury issues so far this postseason. And Evan Mobley has really had to be, that rebounding guy for Cleveland so far this postseason. And he'll have Jason Tatum on him. So do I think he'll be able to stop Tatum defensively against Tatum's offense? I don't think so. I think the X factor in the series is going to really come down to the point guard play. I think it's going to come down to can Drew Holiday, who will be the better of Drew Holiday and Darius Garland. I think Holiday gets the better of the two, and I have Celtics in 5. I don't think this is really going to be a big series between these two teams.
And that only leaves the New York Knicks versus the Indiana Pacers. I will say that Frank the Tank is at this game, Knicks, so beware.
The crew chief, I just saw who the crew chief was. I forgot what his name is, but The Knicks are 3-6 in games with him this season,
Oh yeah, it's
and
the same guy that ref Game 3, I
he
think.
was the same one that. Yep, he was the same one that
Yeah,
ref Game 3.
yeah, it's
So
gonna be a rough one.
yeah, tonight could be a tough game for the
The
Knicks.
refs are going to. This is my opinion.
Yeah,
And I guess I'll start with this. Uh, I believe that every single game, whether it's the Knicks or the Pacers, the home team is going to determine that pace. So the Knicks, the games in New York will be a slow pace, and the games in Indiana will be
and you
fast.
know the
With
Knicks
that
fans
being,
will travel to Indiana too for those
yes,
road
I
games.
personally looked at tickets. Tickets are $92 right now,
Yeah,
and a
they'll be
flight is
there.
$200. So in theory, you can get there with Ubers back and forth under $400, which would be cheaper than a Knicks game.
The
So
same price is going to the Knicks
so
game.
yeah, get ready, guys. The Knicks fans are going to travel. They're going to make a weekend going to Indianapolis. They're going to go maybe see the Colts Stadium. Or have fun time looking at the city. It's still one of the biggest cities in the Midwest, so they're going to travel. And God knows, New York transplants are everywhere. So there's probably a bunch living in the greater Indianapolis area right now. That being said, with I think every single game being determined by pace, and I think that pace is going to come down to where the home team is located. The Pacers are going to win 3 games at home. The Knicks are going to win 4 games at home. It's going to be boring. It's going to be exciting, though. Knicks in 7.
So you think this is going to be the exact way of Cleveland and Orlando? The home team wins every game.
Yep, pretty much. I think it's we need something easy in the script, right? We already had a couple crazy ones.
Nothing's easy when it comes to the New York Knicks. I can tell you that. But
Amen.
again, nothing comes easy when you're a New York sports fan. That's as I saw for the Rangers game yesterday. That game was not easy to watch.
Can you? This is off topic. Can you imagine though if they swept that puck away and then they scored on that? What a massive what if that would be. But let's not talk about that now.
All I know is that I was not nervous all of round one for the Rangers, and that game
Well,
yesterday
you're
got me
playing the
really
favorites now,
nervous.
so
Well, Hurricanes are the Hurricanes are a good team. They're
betting
not an easy
favorites.
opponent. Yeah, they want revenge for 2022. But again, back to the topic ahead for the Knicks and the Pacers. For what I know from this Knicks team, they do not like to end their series as a home, and that's why I don't think they get it done in 7. I have them getting it done in 6. I think at the end of the day, I know I almost did the same thing in the round one. I probably should have done that. I should have known better when I was picking that series with Philly. But I think they get it done in 6. I would not be surprised if Indiana wins game 1 tonight and the Knicks take the next 2. Indiana ties it in game 4, and then the Knicks win the final 2 games of the series to win and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals for what could be a really thrilling matchup between them and Boston, which will certainly be hectic between those two teams. But we know, Johnson, how many times these two teams have played in the playoffs between Indiana and New York. Knicks want revenge for 2013. I really want revenge for 2013 because I'm still, nightmared by Roy Hibbert destroying the Knicks in that series. So I need New York to win this one for sure. I have the Knicks winning in 6 and moving on to their first Eastern Conference Finals trip since I believe the year 2000.
Yeah, so it's the Pacers have owned the last 2 playoff series between Knicks Pacers. The Knicks owned the first 2, and this will be the
Rubber match.
yeah, this could be the rubber match right here.
And I think the only final note is they just announced Victor Wembanyama is the Rookie of the Year this year. So congratulations to Victor.
Shocker.
Not a shocker, realistically.
I said he was going to be borderline. I said he was going to be an all-star.
Yeah, whoever picks
he should have been an all-star.
Whoever picks Scoot Henderson's a real idiot.
Wow, I wonder who could that been?
Not me. Yeah. But I think that pretty much wraps it up, Johnson, for our round 2 preview and a round 1 recap. Anything of note final before the 6-game tips off in 10 minutes?
Yes, in 5 weeks, I want to see Madison Square Garden host the NHL and NBA finals. I want to see a repeat of 1994.
MSG has been buzzing these last couple of weeks. There's a good
hopefully
chance
it continues.
it could happen. Yeah. Every Knicks and Ranger fan is trying every single time to make sure that they could get a similarity of that 94 season and just add it up together to see if it will add up to this season. And so far it has. We'll have to see if it continues. If it does, then the Knicks and the Rangers could be very on their way to maybe winning a championship for the first time. For the Rangers since 94, for the Knicks since 73?
1973.
Yeah, so it's been a while, but it could be a very good wait if these teams are able to get it done these next couple of weeks. So we'll have to see how it all unfolds at MSG and on the road for these two teams. But we'll have to see how it all unfolds as well for this year's NBA playoffs as that will do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. First round of the NBA playoffs has been concluded. We now move on to the second round of the NBA playoffs. We are now down to the final 8 teams in this year's playoffs. Boston versus Cleveland, Knicks and Pacers, Nuggets, T-Wolves, Dallas and OKC, who will move on to the respective conference finals matchups to then get one step closer to the NBA Finals and then get closer to that Larry O'Brien NBA Championship trophy. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson with the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week, and go Knicks!